Hello and welcome back to the channel. So pop punk guitar covers here and coming back at you with another talking head video. Going to do another band reaction, song reaction, sort of song review, if you will. Now I like doing these things because a lot of bands popping up and I'm in their algorithm because I'm in the music space, punk, pop punk, punk adjacent, whatever. But I like seeing all these new bands come through, and a lot of them are reminding me of like older bands that I used to listen to, or I can feel that they're pulling influences. Not totally positive, but I can feel they're pulling influence from like earlier bands that I found out about a long time ago. So I'm doing these to maybe, introduce some older bands to like younger audiences out there, and then they can sort of connect the dots to see maybe where this stuff came from, where it was influenced by, and check out older bands. I love how, within the punk, emo, punk adjacent music genres, I love how this stuff is kind of living on. And a lot of these younger bands popping up are pulling influences from, by now, like bands that were around and active 30 years ago. So it's really kind of cool that this stuff isn't dying. It's only kind of getting stronger. And I want to introduce, people out there to some of the stuff that I feel like has provided influence to these newer bands. So what are we talking about here today? Who are we going to listen to? This band, Train Breaks Down, is another band that's been showing up on my like YouTube feed, social medias, whatever. Train Breaks Down. And I've only seen some videos, snippets of videos, whatnot. Have not heard like a full song. So we're going to listen to a full song today and react. But so I haven't heard a full song, but I can definitely feel that this band is pulling influence from a lot of older bands. Like I said, a lot of like mid-90s bands now that was like 30 years ago. I can definitely feel the influence being pulled, and we're going to talk about that, talk about some of those bands that I feel that influence from. Whether or not that's totally true, I don't know, but it's just my own reaction. So, but yeah, this band and another band that I talked about too, First Day Back, I talked about all of the bands that I felt like they sounded like too, again, from like the 90s, early 2000s. So really awesome that this is living on. It's not dying. It's not being really forgotten about. It's kind of only getting stronger because, these bands can now, because of YouTube and all of that, they can reach, crazy audiences that like back in the 90s, all of these 90s bands that became influences to these bands, those bands didn't really have a huge reach. Eventually some bands did gain that with like major label support and whatnot, but it was still very hard for a lot of those bands to like succeed and live on. But now like we're seeing, bands like Train Breaks Down and First Day Back being able to reach like hundreds of thousands of people, being able to get their music out in front of so many people and influence more and more people. So really cool there. Just want to talk about a little history, I guess, background of the band. I just, plugged it into Google, see what I could come up with. So they are from Los Angeles, California. And they're formed as a project by someone named Ian Herzberg. I believe that's the lead singer, but not totally certain. But it does say they're associated with the Inland Empire scene in Southern California. And I really have no idea what this is. If anybody out there wants to clue me in, other bands in that genre, what it's really about, where it came from, this and that. I've seen Train Breaks Down, TikTok or whatever. They play these sort of outdoor shows. In Southern California, you can play outside all the time. but they play these outdoor shows, huge audiences. They all look so mesmerized by, Train Breaks Down and some other bands. And it's really quite captivating. And I can only imagine that this is what this Inland Empire scene is. I've seen some other videos of other bands playing like the same shows. So I'm guessing that this is that scene, but I really have no idea. But anyways, it looks very interesting, looks mysterious, but also like they're so heavily attended too. The crowd looked just so mesmerized by these bands and so intriguing and cool at the same time. I've been into music for a long time, since like the early 2000s, really got heavily into music and started going to shows and concerts. And I've never actually really witnessed anything like what I'm seeing here. I've been to everything from like really small bar venues to arenas. I've seen the whole span, but nothing seems to be more captivating than these shows that I'm seeing. It's definitely interesting, really cool. And anybody wants to give me some insight, please do. But also, so moving on, the band is post-hardcore, screamo, emo, and they're also associated with a label called Self-Versed Records. I don't really know anything about that label either, but again, really cool band. Really, I'm seeing the influence from a lot of other bands that I know of. We're going to dive in, listen to a song. They have a self-titled release here with 3 songs on it. Going to check out the first song on that called 40 Hour Suit. There also is another release. It's a live recording from a radio station. And this is also intriguing too, because a lot of these 90s bands, that I'm going to talk about, they did like these radio shows, and those would get recorded and pressed on a vinyl or on a CD as like an album. And it's kind of cool. There's I see a huge connection between Train Breaks Down with that radio recording and some other bands that I'll talk about as well, doing the same sort of thing, but back in like 1995. So anyways, without further ado, we'll listen to the song here, first track off their self-titled 40 Hour Suit. Here we go. Okay. First thing that I got to mention here is giving me such a vibe of this really early band called Indian Summer that I know about and that I found out about a really long time ago. But the band, they were active in like 1994, probably had roots even before that. So you're talking real early 90s here, over 30 years ago. But the similarities are so crazy here. Almost exactly the same, like in everything, instrumentation, feel, tone, recording quality, vocal quality, lyrics, vocal delivery, everything is practically almost like listening to Indian Summer. Also that really kind of eerie but noodly guitar in the beginning, before the main guitar riff sort of kicks in. Indian Summer is a really deep cut. A lot of their stuff, especially, 10 to 15 years ago, was almost near impossible to find. I knew of the band because I was heavily interested in always reading Wikipedias and Googling bands that I liked and similar bands. So I knew of Indian Summer, but trying to find their music was almost damn near impossible, because I think for a really long time, everything they did was just a vinyl. Like there was no, there probably was no CDs, nothing, no real MP3s. Like it took a while for like even MP3s to like appear on a site called MySpace back then. But even in the beginnings, in like 2005 or whatnot, there was not even anything on MySpace. I was lucky enough to find some of their records on eBay, and you really had to just like check every week, every month, because even that was so few and far between that a record would pop up, and then you had to like bid on it. This was before you could even like really purchase something from eBay. It was more of a auction type thing. So then you had to like bid on it, and it's like, how much do you want to actually spend on these records? I was lucky enough to get a few of them, and that was the only way you could hear their music. And it sounds almost exactly like this, especially the recording quality. Lo-fi, obviously. Vocals seem like distant, but not polished, but still very like tight in a way. Like nothing really feels amateur, even though this music isn't as polished as like a lot of, those bigger bands that are out there, or like a radio band or whatever. But it's still very complex and complicated to play and perform, and to write. So nothing about it is actually really immature, although it sounds sort of amateur in a way because it's just a lo-fi recording. But also like back in like 1994, when like Indian Summer probably made their recordings, like they just didn't have a budget to like be in a studio for like a month and really polish up, their recordings with like the best producers. So they just did what they could. And it's kind of cool that that influence has lived on, and we definitely hear it quite strongly here. So yeah, that's also really cool, because another like quality of the earlier post-hardcore bands, the earlier emo screamo bands, is they go from like these very beautiful, clean, delicately played guitars with like poetic lyrics, spoken word, soft vocal delivery, to these heavy, distorted guitars, screaming, drums going crazy, just on a dime. And so many of these bands did that. And that is an intriguing quality. I like that. I like those dynamics in music, especially in like pop punk and stuff. I feel like there isn't those dynamics. If you take like your average pop punk song or punk rock song, you don't really get that. You don't get, what is this song going to be? Is it going to be like this poetic, delicate song? Or what is it going to be heavy and chaotic and crushing? And you get the best of both worlds in this genre. So many bands do this. Indian Summer did this. Some other bands that come to mind, there's another band called 400 Years from the 90s that sounds very similar as well. Another band, Sleepy Time Trio. All of these 90s bands. Also another band, Policy of Three. Very similar too in this way. Also Policy of Three is another one of those bands that did like a live radio recording. And it really reminds me of the way there is a live radio recording of Train Breaks Down. it's same kind of vibe. It's just like a live radio recording that they put on a CD and or a vinyl. And Policy of Three did the same thing back in the 90s. I have the record of the radio recording, and it's kind of cool that Train Breaks Down again is taking that angle from all of these early 90s influential punk and screamo bands. Really kind of love it. All right, yeah, and as we go back into like the cleaner guitar parts of this, I cannot not mention, all of those bands from the 90s, like American Football, Captain Jazz, Owls, really getting that vibe again. Some more instrumental ones like Ghost and Vodka played music exactly like this, right? Those arpeggiated, clean guitars. Obviously, yeah. The biggest one that comes to my mind is the band Owls, which is the band that came before Captain Jazz, because Captain Jazz had these qualities, but they were just more chaotic all the time. Whereas Owls just kept the same sort of way they played the instruments, but it was usually always in a cleaner tone. And it really kind of reminds me of this part. It was more tight, cleaner than the Captain Jazz stuff. So that's why this really reminds me of that. Captain Jazz usually was just more chaotic, more distorted. But yeah, definitely getting the Owls vibe here. And, have to mention Braid too, obviously. They did a lot of stuff like this as well. And American Football. Really feeling that in this spot of the song. And yeah, again, as I'm listening to this and my memory is being jogged, I have to mention that this is actually not the first resurgence that I've seen, at least, of this kind of stuff. Obviously, a lot of those bands from the 90s, Indian Summer, Sleepy Time Trio, 400 Years, active in the 90s, they broke up, sometimes before the year 2000. And yeah, so like right around 2000 or whatnot, I feel like that stuff kind of got lost to time for a couple of years. Probably just because it was harder to find the music. A lot of it was on vinyl. All of it existed before social media and the internet completely. So it just wasn't there. You kind of had to be like, you had to kind of live in the location that these bands lived, or just in just like a major city that they toured through, and also be the right age and to be able to like experience, a live show. But so there was that. And then around the time, I want to say like 2004, 2006, 7, maybe even 8, there was another resurgence of this type of music. And a band that comes to mind is Daniel Striped Tiger comes to mind. And I saw that band back in like 2005 or 6. I was in college at the time. So yeah, I had a real connection to like college radio. I lived on a college campus for a few years. And yeah, there were, college shows would happen. Bands would come through. They'd play like the student center or whatnot. And I was friends with some people at the time that like knew other people in bands, and there's just a lot of connections happening. And I witnessed sort of I think the first resurgence of this kind of music really around that time. And yeah, Daniel Striped Tiger was a huge one. Also, another band, By the End of Tonight, comes to mind. Really noodly guitars, in chaotic parts, lo-fi recordings. That band also comes to mind. And it was also kind of the beginning of like the Top Shelf Records era. So that label, Top Shelf Records, I think was sort of just kind of emerging. And in the earlier years, they had a number of bands that like played this like noodly style. And then sort of later on, like 2007 and 8, I know they signed Pianos Become the Teeth, who later on definitely got signed to a bigger label and had access to like bigger shows, bigger marketing and whatnot, and got pretty, relatively known in the scene. But early on, they were on like Top Shelf Records, and they sort of kind of fit in. They obviously, they were like Screamo, emo, had like spoken word poetry, clean parts, heavy parts, very similar. They eventually got like very polished, and which isn't a bad thing, but they just had more access, bigger label, great band. They sort of fit into that earlier resurgence. Played smaller shows in the beginning, in like 2008 and whatnot. So there was a resurgence of that. And a lot of those bands, I feel like, just fell off the map, right? Daniel Striped Tiger, By the End of Tonight, like they kind of just got lost to time in between like 2009, to probably now. I don't really hear anything about them, or whatnot. And, whatever happens. Yeah, bands form and break up all the time. Life happens. I'm not saying every band needs to continue going, but yeah, I just feel like there was another resurgence of this music the more and more I think about it. And a lot of those bands just really, they came up in like the MySpace era. That was like a really great time for these bands to get their music out there. It was obviously MySpace. And that's where a lot of these bands came up through that. That's where I found out about a lot of them too, in that like Screamo kind of scene. I saw Daniel Striped Tiger in like a small tattoo shop in Boston. And yeah, really cool show, really cool band. They have those like noodly parts, screamy parts, poetic parts, lo-fi production. Just the recordings are so cool. Every time I listen to them, they bring me back to like a certain time in my life that I found out about them. And really great band. Fits into this genre, was pretty active, and then I feel like just got lost to time. But interesting connection there that, there was another resurgence, the emo revival, kind of before the emo revival even happened, Yeah, I'll stop it there too, and because this is really reminding me of a band called Thursday. A lot of people know about that band. Still active today, still very relevant. But earlier, they had an album. It was called Waiting, and that's what this really reminds me of. Because we know Thursday as this like pretty massive band, been around a long time. But if you go back and listen to that Waiting album, it's pretty like lo-fi, low quality production, sort of the I want to say like the beginnings, almost the absolute beginnings of kind of post-hardcore as we know it, the more popularized post-hardcore. Post-hardcore dates back to, again, the 90s, late 80s with like Fugazi and all of those DC bands, which I also feel Train Breaks Down is pulling influence from those DC bands too as well. I can definitely feel that. There's a band called None Left Standing that this reminds me of too as well. So yeah, but back to my point, post-hardcore as we know it really kind of started, I feel like, with Thursday, and a lot of other bands too. But that Waiting album, it's real. This part of the Train Breaks Down song is really giving me vibes from that Waiting album. Just the lo-fi quality, but also like the really heavy guitars. And you get that here, and you get that in the Waiting album. And it just really reminds me of that. I don't know. It's just an interesting little connection. That's just gonna fade out to the end of the song. But so there you have it. Train Breaks Down, really cool band, really sort of just kind of all over YouTube and seeing kind of more and more of them. And I believe this release actually came out a few years ago, so they're probably kind of due for new music, and it's really going to be interesting to see where this goes, because I believe it's gained a lot of popularity, but are they going to stay to the same production? Are they going to stay, with the same influence that, like, I could be wrong, I have no idea, but like that 90s post-hardcore Screamo influence, are they going to stay with that? Or are they going to take it in another direction? Who knows? Even just more polished production could completely change the vibe of this band. You know what I mean? And with all the popularity that they, I think, are gaining, but still being mysterious at the same time. Like I said, it's been a while. We haven't seen new music, I think, in a long time since this came out. So, like, are they just going to, break up and fall off the radar too? Which would also be kind of funny, because that's what happened to a lot of these earlier 90s bands that sounded like this. They were active, they formed, they were active, they put out a small catalog of music, played a lot of shows, and then just disappeared. And kind of some of them got lost to time, but really like this band. And I think whatever happens, it'll be interesting. So, but yeah, so definitely listen to Train Breaks Down if you like this kind of stuff. And also the other bands too. Indian Summer, 400 Years, None Left Standing, Sleepy Time Trio, Daniel Striped Tiger, Owls, Captain Jazz, all of those bands. And you'll hear the influences that I'm talking about. If you like this, you're going to like those. And it'll just be cool. Just go back and listen to that stuff. You can find where this came from. If, I'm completely wrong, that it could be the case, but it's still this is my personal opinion. So I can still draw the connections. I can still hear the similarities, feel the influence. And I'm also excited that bands like this band, Train Breaks Down, and other bands, First Day Back, it's really great how they're staying so true and authentic to this style and honoring it in this way. Who knows what the next level for those bands looks like, but honestly, I haven't really felt anything like this from a lot of other bands, in the same sort of scene, genre, or whatever, in their revival. This is the most authentic and true I've ever heard. So I'll leave it at that. We have Train Breaks Down. And yeah, go give that band a listen. All right. Have a good one.